Hello, and welcome to my first devlog. After developing my skills in Unity for several years now, it's time for me to start something I'll probably regret. My first multiplayer game. I see a lot of posts about the horrors of making a multiplayer game, but I can't help but create the game I've wanted to see for years. I'm a huge fan of sci-fi space movies, shows, and video games, especially when it comes down to large-scale fleet battles. This is something many other space games capture very well, but there's a couple things that hold them back for me. That is, the ability to quickly get into a PvP space fight, especially where you actively control a fleet of spaceship in a multiplayer scenario, and that these virtual spaceships can be extremely expensive to lose in a fight, whether it be from the hours played or the real money spent. Now these are all games I love and play myself, as the depth of each one can provide an extremely fulfilling experience. But the ability to control a full fleet of ships in a PvP battle without worrying about some explosions, and also providing a meaningful sense of progression, is something I want to create. So how do I plan on doing this? Well, let me start with some of my inspirations. As you may see, I love the aesthetic of games such as EVE Online, Star Citizen, Elite Dangerous, the X series, and the Homeworld series, among others. But when it comes to gameplay, I think Clash Royale. Yep, the mobile multiplayer game and the creators of Clash of Clans. When I was at extremely busy points in my life, I could rarely play games, so I'd hop on Clash Royale for a quick fight here and there. Even when I was home, I was too tired to dedicate time to sit at my desk to grind it for a spaceship that would probably get destroyed in battle. This gave me the idea to create a mix between both genres, with a multiplayer deathmatch style space game, where each player handpicks a fleet of spaceship with the sole purpose of destroying their opponent in a strategic battle. So with that, let's jump into the making of... Just kidding, that's a placeholder name, as I have some name ideas that I'd like to share at a later time, and it will play a lot different from Clash Royale. So let's jump into the first devlog. For the multiplayer networking, I'll be using Unity's netcode for game objects. So the first order of business will be spawning each client into a scene with a player character. To do this, I created a fancy station with a cube and 2 defensive outposts with spheres. The station will be the winning target for the enemy. I want both the station and outposts to have characteristics the player can change that influence the battle, but that's for a later date. Each player prefab has a main camera set at a 45-degree angle, using orthographic projection. This gives a top-down view of the battlefield, where all objects remain the same size no matter their distance. This will be the main view for battle, although I do plan on adding some cool spectating cameras for ships to show better scale and perspective. I then set up a main menu to start the server and the clients. I also added Quantum Console from the Unity Asset Store for debugging, as it's very easy to implement and works great for the client builds. So the server can be started, the clients can join, and if the server approves the client, they spawn with their station to a designated position. I then created a game manager script that the server uses to control the state of the game. It makes sure both clients join before starting the game. It then keeps track of the timer, resources, and any changes in the game state. This is done by using networked variables, which are synced across all clients. Now I need to work on the client's ability to spawn objects. So I went over to Blender to get a quick spaceship placeholder using a plugin called Starship Generator, which procedurally generates spaceship shapes. I will not be using this for the final game, as I want a specific design choice reminiscent of modern Navy ships, at least for the first ship manufacturer I plan. I like the one I chose here because it looked like it would be a large ship given the 2 bridges. I imported it into Unity using my Dreadnought sizing convention, which will be the largest ships in the game. This way I can use it as a testbed for different weapon designs. Once in Unity, we can add the network object and the network transformed components to it. Then add it to the network list, which the network manager uses for all networked objects. This will give us the ability to spawn it in-game across all connected clients. For some of the following footage, my recording software was coming out laggy, but the game was not. I'll let you know where it is fixed later in the video. In order to spawn an object, I have the client request a location by clicking where they want it to spawn. This ray casts to the spawnable area and the server checks if that location is allowed. The server RPC was working, but I only had a game object spawning on the server for testing. I just had to spawn the network object of the prefab instance and it synced across all clients. So there we had it, players joining the server with the ability to spawn ships. So let's move to the basics of battle. For combat, I really want it to be a strategic game about managing a fleet. I want the player to have complete control of the positioning of their ships. This means for each ship they spawn, they must select a destination for battle, and each ship will have a specific firing arc and range. To do this, I first allowed the client to send a position request to the server to move their desired ship. I got the client and server movement functionality down for a simple move request, but I will completely revise this later in the video. The next step was to create the ability for each ship to be able to target the opposing client's ship. I did not want each ship to always keep track of enemy ships for memory usage, so I'll have the ships only keep track of a specific target within their firing arc. Each firing arc will be created using a custom collider, but not extremely complicated for performance reasons. For now, I'm just using a box collider around the ship. When an enemy enters the collider, it will add it to a list of targets in range. When they leave the collider, it will get rid of the reference to that enemy ship. Now that we have basic movement and targeting, we can go ahead and create a turret for combat. In our lovely placeholder fashion, this will be a cylinder, a sphere, and 2 extended cubes. I also added a quick particle system I'm basing off the firing characteristics of a real-world automated turret. I created a tracking script for the turret, which locks onto whichever target is assigned by the collider. With netcode for game objects, you cannot have a child network object spawn dynamically. So I had to spawn each turret in a designated position on the ship and child it, only after the ship was spawned. This fixed the error and the turrets were able to spawn correctly, target the ship, and fire. For the damage dealt to the enemy, I created an armor script that attaches to the ships and keeps track of collisions. Then I had to make sure the turrets were despawned properly, as they will simply not be destroyed with their parent. So on the armor script, I added the proper despawning of a network object for the turrets. After this and a lot more behind the scenes, I had proper movement, targeting, and fighting. Right now, the ship just goes in a straight line, but this defeats a lot of the functionality of the combat I'm aiming for. So how will I fix this? Well, with something called a Bezier curve, which many of you may be familiar with. But put very simply, a Bezier curve defines a smooth path between a set of points. In order for the specific firing arcs to work, the player will need to position their ship accordingly. To accomplish this, the player can draw a curve that the ship will follow. This will allow them to aim based on the ship's targeting characteristics. For this, I have it so the player can select a ship and draw a path of points. This is sent to the server, which then checks if everything about the path is acceptable. The server calculates a Bezier curve between all path points for the ship to follow. All of the path creation is server authoritative, so the client cannot manipulate any movement. In other games, I really love the look of lights that designate a landing zone. So, to visually keep track of each ship's destination, I want to spawn lights along the path. I created what I'm calling a navigation light for now, which will spawn along the curve. The red markers are the points used in the Bezier calculation. Those will not be visible. This is where I fixed my recording software. As you can see, the client can send a path to the server where it validates it and spawns the navigation lights. The server doesn't need to spawn the lights, so it has the client spawn them. Each client can only see their own path, which is good because I want ship positioning to be a vital part of battle. I also spaced the temporary nav lights so there weren't so many on the path. As you may have seen in the console, the path is actually checking for obstacles. I did this by raycasting between each original path point on the client side, because if it fails, there is no need to talk to the server. But if it succeeds, the server does all its checks before approving the path. I had a problem for a while where the first ray was starting at the ship's height, so it never hit the spawnable area collider, and this was giving me errors. To fix this, I had all the points moved to a value of 0.1 on the y-axis. This made it so the rays would always check the proper distance without overshooting, which could lead to marking something outside of the path as an obstacle. If something in the path is an obstacle, the move order will not be allowed, and the player must try another route. With all of this complete, I now have the core structure for some spaceship fleet battles. Clients can connect to the server, spawn their ships, and try to destroy each other. It sounds simple, but there was a lot of work done behind the scenes to make this scalable for ships, weapons, and game state logic to be implemented. Next, I'd like to work on the visuals and not have it in the boring gray box state. If you are interested in this project and want to follow its development, please consider liking and subscribing. I'd really like to post frequent updates, and that would help tremendously. If you'd like to support me further, please check out my published game, Recyclefish, on iOS and Android. The link is in the description below. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next devlog.